To be clear here, this is in fact Anne Hathaway's year. We're just being gifted incredible performance over and over again from her.
Our whole street has moved.
How the hell is that even possible?
Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve. I'm a film and television critic, an anti-monarchist except for when Amelia Mignonette Thermopolis Rinaldi has a new movie to release because we are guaranteed to be gifted a performance. Look at what she's offered us this year alone. Mother Mary, The Devil Wears Prada 2, The Odyssey, today's movie, which is The End of Oak Street, and Verity, which we will be covering in a couple of months from now, as we already published a source material video last year. Now, what of The End of Oak Street? The premise reads, after a mysterious cosmic event rips Oak Street from suburbia and transports their neighborhood to some place unknown, the Platt family soon discovers that their very survival depends on them sticking together as they navigate their now unrecognizable surroundings. Before seeing this movie, I believe I had seen the first trailer, or perhaps it was a teaser trailer. There was a fair bit of what was in the film that ended up feeling like a discovery upon actually sitting down to watch it in the cinema. It's offering sentimentality, silliness, and spectacle in equal measure. A domestic family drama meets a retro family adventure, further elevated by the depth of Anne Hathaway's performance. Now, the final trailer does reveal the main thing that this family is up against, so if you do not already know what that is, and you don't want to know beforehand, you have until the count of 3 to click off of this video. 3, 2, 1, it's dinosaurs. This patch of a suburban area somehow ends up back in dinosaur times, full of dinosaurs doing dinosaur things. However, the main trailer that I saw in the lead up to this was the first one, which was more so about selling fear, tension, suspense, and dread at some unknown threat. I didn't see the trailer many times though, and I hadn't given much thought to the details of what the film was going to be, so upon actually sitting down to watch it in full, I was somewhat surprised to realize that it was also a period piece. If you were to pause any of these promotional trailers that were released beforehand, that would have been easy to start to figure out that it was in fact set some point further back in time. The cars are smaller, the clothing that the characters are wearing, the interior design of family homes, among other things, were all indications that it is a period piece. The time setting is perfectly aligned with what type of movie this is. This type of man versus nature, sentimental big family adventure movie. The obvious comparison people have been making is Jurassic Park, simply because of the dinosaurs, but there are plenty of other films you could compare it to for one reason or another. Jumanji comes to mind. I would also mention Twister, although that's not a movie with children in the main ensemble of characters, but it does evoke a particular emotional tone and feeling where you have the juxtaposition of a more intimate relationship drama to explore at the human level, while on the larger scale, the humans are up against an enormous danger from nature. In a way, the eeriness of a suburban family ending up somewhere that is full of dinosaurs was synchronized with the eeriness of watching a movie that so accurately brought back the feeling of a bygone era of movies. It's just as much a time-traveling movie for the Platt family as it is for the audience, because we simply do not see new movies being created like this anymore.
Gather supplies. Grab anything you can use as a weapon.
I've mostly kept things broad, but now I want to have the room to say slightly more with my feedback. I'm not going to spoil the entire movie or even the major reveals or occurrences that happen further into the film's story, but I don't want to be quite as broad as I was before. When the film opens, viewers are introduced to a quaint suburban neighborhood. We have the Platt family, the mother Denise, played by Anne Hathaway, the father Greg, played by Ewan McGregor, the older daughter Audrey, played by Maisy Stella, whom I know first and foremost for her lead role in Megan Park's film from 2 years ago, and younger brother Brian, played by Christian Convery, whom I most remember for playing the younger version of the twins in Osgood Perkins' The Monkey. But this actor was also young Victor in Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, so that's quite a year to have. One of the very first things that's established about this family is that the parents, Denise and Greg, are having marital issues, and there is a concern, particularly on Denise's part, that this conflict is having a negative impact on the children. There is a stark contrast between the characters and performances of Denise and Greg. Anne Hathaway never gives anything less than 200% to a performance. It's as if she sprints and throws herself full speed into every role she does. I remember hearing her say in an interview that she does an enormous amount of work in preparing for a role, asking as many questions as she deems necessary, even if those questions and the amount of them seem like an extraordinary amount to others. And her explanation for doing this was that when it comes time to actually film the movie, she will be so fully in the know about her character, the vision for the overall film and its story, and as a result, she will be able to just go and perform exactly what's needed for the role. There will be no need to stop in the middle of filming to try to figure something out about her character, because she's already done all of that work before the movie started filming. That approach feels especially apparent in something like The End of Oak Street. Most of the time, the other performers in the movie are, at minimum, fine. The only time there was at least one bit of acting I didn't particularly believe in The End of Oak Street, it was when one of the actors was meant to be in the presence of a prehistoric creature that was moving by in front of them, and it was very clear that this actor either had no or very little experience having to do that type of acting where there's nothing actually there, maybe a tennis ball or a man in a green suit at most. I don't know what the process was for making this movie, by the way. I haven't gone looking for any behind-the-scenes making-of videos in order to do this review. It's merely based off of my impression of watching the film. For Greg, Ewan McGregor's character, my issue probably comes from a combination of how the character is written and also how Ewan is playing him, but I found him at times to be underwhelming to watch. I got the impression that they were going for something with the character where he's meant to be unassuming, a simple man, but when you put him up against the likes of Anne Hathaway, the stark contrast between them more so ends up coming across as though he appears at times like he's not trying hard enough. It feels like a performance that would have resonated better if they had instructed him to emote in such a way that is hinting at a deeper interiority of the character. He doesn't need to say more out loud, but by simply emoting and speaking his lines in a way that implies there is a lot more going on beneath the surface, he probably would have been more engaging to watch. The children are both good enough for what their roles are in a story like this. They're not being asked to have an enormous depth that goes far beyond the primary two-pronged conflict of the film, the family drama, and trying to not be eaten by dinosaurs. When I compare The End of Oak Street to the classics of a bygone era that are similar in concept and tone, the greatest obstacle The End of Oak Street has to overcome is the decades of nostalgia the most ardent fans of those movies already have for those releases. If that audience, who is probably the audience that is best suited to enjoy a movie like The End of Oak Street, if that audience doesn't have an open mind to meet a new film doing something similar, but on its own terms, they might dismiss it as simply not being good enough as those other classics that they have already imprinted on from a young age. However, if I compare The End of Oak Street to newer blockbusters that are released nowadays, which have been overproduced by a corporate committee to try to check boxes for the sake of becoming a 4-quadrant movie, there is no denying that The End of Oak Street is better than most of those. And when you reach the end of the film, it becomes apparent why. This isn't a major plot spoiler, I'm about to say, don't worry, even though I'm referring to the end of the film. The End of Oak Street was written, directed, and co-produced by one storyteller, and his name is David Robert Mitchell. The end of the film, in the credits, there is a dedication to his father. There is a particular type of emotional sentimentality that comes through in The End of Oak Street, and if you presume that the writer-director is creating this story in such a way that feels reminiscent of the films he might have watched with his father growing up, that does feel accurate to what the tone of this film is, as well as the concept that it has. It's never so dangerous or scary to the point of being capable of traumatizing the adults in the audience who have the nostalgia for this era of movies. However, the threat of the dinosaurs does feel believable by way of the effectiveness of both the technical aspects of the filmmaking and the actors who have to do the running away. and running away quite often. It's a movie that is also aiming to be fun for the audience who shows up to see it at the cinema. You can tell because of how many times the film would do things like have the characters be in a particular location, and then you see a dinosaur or dinosaurs lurking around in the background, and there will be a certain comedic twinge to the way the film lingers in those spaces. It's as if it's offering a wink and a nod to the audience to get ready, because we're about to start things up again of running and chasing, and just enjoy the fun that's about to be had. The VFX used to bring these prehistoric creatures to life, I would say, are better than average, specifically by modern day blockbuster standards, which usually have awful VFX. Sometimes it looks better in the film, other times it could have used perhaps a bit more time to fully cook. You can tell when certain prehistoric creatures were rendered by artists who had the means to do better quality work versus when they actually were given the time to do it well. Usually when it's a mix of a real set with real actors and their real props, and it's intermingling in some way, usually with a vast backdrop of some prehistoric setting, it might not be quite as convincing because the scale of how much needs to be rendered in that backdrop is such that you probably should have given those artists more time to work on that. Nonetheless, it overall adds up to a movie that was good fun for the whole family, or at least whomever in the family is old enough to attend a PG-13 movie. It's also a movie that is, surprisingly enough, only about an hour and a half long. If you are one of those people who complains about movies being too long as an excuse to not go to the cinema, even though you have no issues with binging mediocre direct-to-streaming releases at home, here you have it. An easy breezy, beautiful hour and a half with Anne Hathaway steering the ship. Take it or leave it. Stick around, though, on my channel, because before you know it, it will be time to talk about the Verity movie. We already did a video, as I previously said, on the film's source material book. It will not be difficult for the film to be better than that book because Anne Hathaway is a much better actor than Colleen Hoover is a writer.